Hello, good morning. And here we are again for the last day of our conference, online conference, Empowering Future Teachers with eTwinning. I hope you, if you are a participant of this conference, that you've been having an excellent 3 days of work. And we are here today for one of our parallel sessions, the one that is actually live streamed, to talk about the importance of collaboration and learning communities in initial teacher education. And to do this with us today, we have Conor Galvin from the University College in Dublin. And sorry, just a second. And I actually have a great pleasure to have Conor with us today. Conor is a director of doctoral studies at the UCD Dublin College of Social Sciences in Law and Law School of Education, sorry, where he also lectures and researches on various education, public policy, and research methods programs. His research interests include policy networks, social capital, professional knowledge, and the impact of new and emerging technology on learning and society. He has been a lead researcher and external evaluator on EU fund projects and has acted as assessor on a number of EU actions relating to the information society in Age 2020. Dr. Galvin is a long time and passionate advocate for eTwinning, and it's a really great pleasure, and we are very happy to have him here with us today to talk about the importance of collaboration and learning communities in initial teacher education and how eTwinning actually contributes to this. So with no further ado, I would like to invite Conor to come on the virtual stage. And Conor, thank you so much for accepting the invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ruth. It's a great pleasure indeed to be here among colleagues old and new. The topic I've been asked to speak to for the next 25 minutes or so is to do with collaboration and learning communities in initial teacher education, and what we can perhaps learn from the rather unfortunate COVID moment that we're living through currently. Now, I will start with a disclosure because these things are always best put up front. I'm a teacher educator for almost 30 years, but in my deep heart, I'm a teacher. So what I do in my university teaching reflects very much the English teacher, history teacher that I was a very long time ago. I try to run active sessions. I try to run sessions that involve my students in as many ways as possible. So basically, that's important to bear in mind, because that's one of the things that brought me to eTwinning in the first instance. So while I am a teacher, I'm also a researcher. Now, effectively, I'm a teacher who researches rather than a researcher who teaches in a university context. So as Ruth has said, my interests are to do with pedagogy, to do with technology in the teaching workplace, and also to do with education policy down the years. And there has been some fun developments in that area indeed. I don't think we're finished with them yet in terms of COVID. The second disclosure that I would make is that just about everything I've ever learned as a teacher educator comes from being involved in projects, comes from working in collaboration, comes from working with others. And this, I think, has become a hallmark of my own learning style. So it was a great pleasure indeed to talk about, or to be invited at least, to talk about collaboration today, because it's a very large part of what I do on a daily basis. Now, I will, of course, make one further and final observation. None of this really prepared me for what happened on the 12th of March, when our university, along with every other university on the island of Ireland, shut down, when my students suddenly found themselves without an academic home, and where we had to sort of start rethinking from the very ground up everything we actually do in relation to the teacher education programs that I'm involved in, and also in relation to the various research activities that I'm involved in, many of which involve teachers and teacher education. So what I thought I would look at today has its origins in a comment by a sociologist, Asha Mean. Some of you will know his work. It goes back quite a distance at this stage. He's a sociologist based in Cambridge University. He made a very astute observation. He said that when you're talking about how people learn, you need to talk about the prosaics of situated learning, the ordinary everyday things that we do, the way that we learn in doing and through doing, the way that we assemble our expertise in application. In other words, it doesn't happen without a bit of thought and a bit of work. Now, that's a little bit academic, but let's put it in real words. When we talk about collaboration and community, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. We're talking about learning in and through practice, learning new and learning new ways, mostly by doing them. And that's effectively where I want to park for the next 20 minutes or so. I thought it'd be useful to try and give a couple of examples, not just from my own world, but from the world of others who are involved in teacher education. So when it comes to illustrating this argument that we learn best through communication and through community and through collaboration, I want to look at the experience of two networks in particular and two individual programs that have caught my attention, particularly over the last couple of months. Now, it's not because they are doing everything perfectly. It's not because they are exemplars. They're not. But they are doing some very interesting things and doing them very well. And that's what I'd like to focus on for today. As an academic, of course, I always have a but first. And my but first here is I want to say a little bit about the concept of learning community and a little bit about the concept of collaboration, because they're not as clear and as straightforward as we might assume. The most important point about learning community is that it doesn't just happen. A learning community is made. And this is a slide from a session that took place in Brussels a number of years ago. It's probably as good a description of a community of practice as you're likely to get. Learning communities have clear purpose. They create safe environments. You have a committed core group that carries the thing along. To stay involved in a learning community, you have to stay motivated. You need to understand your participants and you need to have a clear idea where you're going. And effectively, an awful lot of that is achieved through good active facilitation. That's the kind of thing that we see people like Ruth doing in the network that we're involved in currently. The second thing to remember, I suppose, is that you don't just start a network, you have to feed it and keep it alive. Again, another slide borrowed this time from a business school student who's talking about communities of practice. And notice the cycles. You inquire, you set it up, you prototype it, you launch it, then you grow and you sustain it. And that's true of just about every learning community I've ever been involved in. It is especially true of the learning community that most of us are most familiar with, that of the eTwinning and the teachers that are involved in the eTwinning spaces. Collaboration also is a rather complex concept in many ways. Now, this is from a different part of my world. I teach a lot to do with collaboration and coordination and so on in a course that I work with for people in development studies. But recently when I put up this slide, I said, you know, there's actually quite a lot in there that speaks to the current moment. So, for example, we are all very much in academic life captains of our own ship. We run our own courses, we keep our own spaces, we operate in silos. The COVID moment has pushed us into a different way of thinking. And it's much more common now among academics, certainly among those that I know, to talk and think in terms of we're all in this together. We need to support each other. We need to collaborate in ways that we never did previously. It has introduced interesting new ways of working, where we have a very, very considerable degree of sharing not just of expertise, but also of information, where there's a lot of asking and offering that wouldn't have taken place previously, perhaps, where there's a lot of producing and co-producing of courses, materials, sessions, etc. And most importantly, where people who never turned on a computer if they could help it are now very much technology engaged. So all of that, I think, reflects a change, a sea change in relation to collaboration in higher education and especially in teacher education courses. However, we're only at the beginning. I would suggest that we've started to think laterally. we have started to build the teaching education profession that reflects the changes we're living through in the COVID moment, and that more accurately perhaps reflects the world in which we currently find ourselves and will find ourselves over the next 10 or 15 years. So I thought, I can talk. People will listen for 10 minutes and then they'll switch off. I thought it would be better if I actually spoke to examples rather than my own ideas and my own theories. So what I've done is I have selected a series of 4 examples, or what I like to call my sources, in relation to thinking about collaboration and in relation to thinking about learning community. 2 of those are national and international networks, and the other 2 are courses. So the reason I've picked them is because, as I said, they're not perfect, but they are very good examples of the lived realities that we've all been going through as teacher educators in the past few months. So that's really where it all starts. The first is the European Distance and E-Learning Network, more commonly known as EDEN. Now, this would not be a first port of call for an awful lot of teachers in the past, but they have done the most incredible amount of work in the past 2 to 3 months. They have stepped up. They have produced almost weekly videos and video guides, webinars, seminars, you name it, they've done it in relation to supporting all of us in higher education, and also particularly those in teacher education in terms of the move to online work. So this is a screenshot from one of the early seminars. They actually started in mid-March. So from mid-March onwards, Eden were running almost weekly seminars that are marked by a number of things. They were exactly what was needed when it was needed. They were free to access, and they were very non-judgmental. People turned up who hadn't a clue what they were doing. Nobody told them to go away. Nobody told them to, oh, you need to go away and do a 101 and then come back. Advice was offered on the spot. So the first series of webinars was entitled Education in Times of a Pandemic. And there were about 8 or 9 of in total in that series. And we had kind of world leaders in relation to the use of technology for teaching and learning in higher education. People like Mark Brown, people like Marcy Powell, and so on, who gave freely of their time to support people who were new at finding their way into the online world. That seminar series then switched to a second topic where they start talking about living with a new normal. Now, it's a lovely expression, a new normal. It's not the new normal. There were 6 seminars in this series. As you can see from the stats, there was almost 1,000 participants, 22 speakers, people from all over the world, mostly from Europe. 89 different countries were involved. And all of this, of course, is banked and freely available online in their YouTube site. Now, the sorts of topics that they look at are equally interesting. Transitioning to online work, moving to the next phase, how to build communities of support for teachers. What a wonderful topic, and such a timely topic in terms of what we are trying to do in teacher education, because so much of what we're doing now is building those networks of supports online that will help our student teachers survive over the coming at least the coming couple of months, and probably even longer. They then went on and they opened all of their conferences to the public. So things that would have been very expensive to attend normally became free. So their annual conference in Romania was opened to all comers. Their workshops on online and distance learning, the entire Open Learning Week, which was based this year in Berlin, basically, but they had a wonderful title, We're All in This Together, Rising to the Challenges. And there were a number of sessions directed at teacher educators as part of that program. Also their research workshop, because they don't just do teaching online, they also do research online. So their research workshop turned to focus on the topic that was most interesting in many ways for many of us, enhancing this student experience of learning through technology. So in other words, keeping it human at a time when it's very important that whatever we do online has a human face. So if I were to sum it up, I would say, in terms of what we can learn from that particular network in relation to learning community and collaboration, I would note the extraordinary generosity that members of that network actually displayed. I would note the fact that they were very strategic in what they did. They did the things that were most important at the times they were most needed, and also that they're strongly practitioner focused. They talked directly to us in a language that we could understand in relation to the problems we were having those days and those weeks. It's an excellent use of European funding because the network is part funded by the Commission. The other thing, in terms of collaboration, the collaboration very quickly moved to a global level. And in the early days of Eden, we saw the movement then to the Global Education Coalition under UNESCO, and Eden became a strong supporter of that. Collaboration was very much on the techno-pedagogical model. So those are my takeaways in terms of what I could learn and what I would point to in terms of the Eden experience and what that network did. The second network is more personal to me because it's a network here on the island of Ireland, and it connects teacher educators in the north of Ireland with teacher educators in the south of Ireland. It has been in existence now for almost 20 years, and it connects to the peace process that is ongoing on the island of Ireland. The network is called SCOTENS, the Standing Conference on Teacher Education North and South. SCOTENS is a little bit conservative. I hope my colleagues in SCOTENS don't mind me saying that, in the sense that we did the usual things. We ran an annual conference, we ran a teacher exchange north-south, and we did some seed funding to support projects that crossed the boundary between the northern and the southern parts of this island. COVID changed all of that. We are, I would, and again, I look at this picture, I never know whether I'm in the south looking north or in the north looking south, but that is a border, and it is a contested border. And we believe in SCOTENS that we are the only network of our kind that connects teacher educators across an openly contested border space. If I'm wrong on that, and if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to come back and show me other networks, I'd be delighted to hear so, because we're looking for partners for projects that involve crossing boundaries and dissolving boundaries in this regard. So everything changed. We were not particularly technological as a network. We very quickly had to become technological. So the conference title changed to Teacher Education in the COVID Moment. We abandoned our real world conference and we went all online. And the beauty of that is we could bring in people from everywhere. So Neil Selwyn from Monash University, Professor Neil Selwyn, became our keynote, and he started one of the best conversations on the uses and abuses of technology in teacher education that I've ever been part of. We were able to run our traditional panels and seminars because we simply switched online, and I had the great pleasure and privilege of chairing some of those and working with colleagues from the north and the south in relation to thrashing out issues that affected us all in terms of switching to the online environment as teacher educators. We did, however, manage to keep our student exchange alive. It was a virtual exchange this year, and it will be into the spring, but it is still going. And we have also managed to keep our funding streams for our projects. We have simply switched our projects to online North-South projects rather than North-South projects in the traditional sense that we've actually been funding. So for me, the learning that came out of that particular, being involved in that particular community over the past couple of months, I suppose the first thing is the depth of the community. There are people in SCOTENS I never knew were there, and the move to COVID actually helped us to discover those people. Young teacher educators, PhD students, even teaching students, people who are currently practicing and training to become teachers. They have a huge amount to bring to our community, and we've managed to bring them in. Again, I was struck by the generosity of colleagues. People give you time. They make themselves available in ways that you'd be surprised, and at a frequency you'd be surprised. And we spoke very much in and among ourselves about the idea of applied and realized value. In other words, doing stuff that is useful to us now and learning how to do it by doing it. To my mind, that very much describes an eTwinning project in many ways. You're actually in the middle of it, figuring it out as you go along very often, and it usually ends up very well. In terms of collaboration, we found very much untapped technical abilities. People in our network could do stuff using technology, simple things, everything from simple ideas like running a webinar right the way through to running a better web stream, to improving our websites, to using Twitter and reaching out on social media in ways we never did together. And we found working together in new and very different ways was made possible by the move to the COVID moment. Technology opened doors for a lot of us that had not been opened previously. The two courses then that I'd like to speak to are different. And again, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on either course, but I did give a fair bit of thought to what I'd like to say about each course. The first one is a lateral entry teacher education program that is run by the ZLSB, which is the Teacher Education and Research Center in the Technical University of Dresden in Germany. Now, it's an interesting program in and of itself, but what they've done in COVID times, I think is quite fascinating. The team that runs the program is quite small. There are 5 on the core team, the Professor Galvin, who leads the team, and then the 4 colleagues, all of whom work, I think, as hard as about 40 in other places. So they run a course for 120 students, a mixture of primary and secondary. They're non-standard or lateral entrance. In other words, they're not the traditional young people coming into teacher education. It's part of a 2-year overall funded federal university program. And it's led by a mix of it involves a mix of university and on-site, what they call internships. Now, the reality is that most of the work is led by what they call docents, or teachers effectively at the level of the school in some cases, or acting as university tutors in others. And they're the ones that do the heavy lifting, if you like, in relation to all of this. Now, it's surprising, or it was surprising to me, how poor the technology was in relation to general usage in this particular course. And again, I'm sure colleagues in Dresden won't mind me saying this, but I was involved in their first international webinar, which took place 2 years ago, and it was extraordinary. They had never done Skype calls, they had never done anything like that at all, and the whole thing was a bit of a fairy tale and novelty for them. The program itself is unique because it's funded centrally through Germany, and it is the only program of its kind in the Saxony area. So I think that's also important to bear in mind. They are funded and they have money, but they didn't really know what to spend it on. COVID solved that problem for them, because what happened was they were faced with huge issues, closures. The schools closed, the students lost their internship placements, the university modules had to be cancelled. There were technology shortcomings. There's surprisingly poor infrastructure, and they only had 1 technologist available to the entire program. 120 student teachers with only 1 technologist in a very challenging context. They also had capacity issues in terms of the personnel, the people working, the docents particularly, were not confident and not really experienced. They had no online teaching experience, and indeed some of them had very, very limited ICT experience. So those were the challenges, if you like, that the program suddenly found itself facing. The solutions, I think, were quite interesting and quite extraordinary, but it did involve a fair amount of money. They focused on capacity building, so on the core team and on the docent team, and they focused on the pedagogical uses of technology. They didn't throw everything at the technology. They focused on getting people slowly up to speed in relation to using technology for pedagogical purposes. There was an infrastructure build, but they focused on personal equipment and kit for the docents and also for the core teachers. And they built a media laboratory within the institution itself, which they didn't have previously. They had brave ideas about supporting the schools. In actual fact, the schools ended up in many ways supporting them, because one of the things that happened, and it happened in Ireland also, the schools responded in ways that surprised themselves and surprised us in teacher education. And we very often ended up, like they did in Dresden, learning from and taking the lead from what was happening at the school level, rather than leading in relation to teacher education practices using technology at the school level. So a bit of a turnabout for the people in Dresden, and similar, I suppose, for Dublin also. What strikes me is the level of camaraderie, the level of personal community that was built up, the level of friendships that built up through the network, through their learning community, the idea that leadership and followership are interconnected. You can only lead a community that wants to be led. And that's effectively what happened in the schools in that situation. Very pragmatic focus. It was all about getting stuff done. And again, a huge emphasis on applied value, doing stuff that is useful and learning stuff that is useful now. So the collaboration with school partners, as I say, was an insight to all of us. They ended up working together in highly structured ways and against very tight deadlines and against targets. That I found interesting because it wouldn't have happened in Ireland. We don't tend to structure things perhaps as carefully and as well as they do in Dresden. And they got great support from the Dresden University, but not from the core university, from the international division, which I thought was incredible because, and it makes sense at one level, because this is the division in the university that was already using technology most widely. And that's where they went for their support, and that's where they got it. So those are my takeaways in relation to Dresden. The final program then that I want to look at is the Migrant Teacher Program, or the MTP, which is effectively a bridging program run in a small university institution in Ireland. And again, I'm going to go through this quite quickly because my time is moving along. The objective of this particular program is to prepare teachers who are professionally qualified in other countries to enter the Irish teaching workforce. Now, that's the cohort from last year. 43 began, 39 completed, 38 of them are now teachers in the Irish system. By any rubric, that's an incredible achievement. And again, it's very much down to the people that ran the program. Rory McDade, Gareth Campbell, Dr. Emer Nolan, who set it up, and the leadership of the professor who runs the institution, the small college, Professor Teresa O'Doherty. They made this program possible. And likewise, when it came to the switch to online, they were the people who took a deep breath and made the hard decisions about what they were going to do next. So they continue the focus of the program in terms of school context and culture, school curriculum, teaching as a profession, developing a career in Ireland. All of these things stayed in place, but a lot had to change in relation to how it was done and who was involved. The interesting thing for me is that the big supporters here were the teacher unions. It was the teacher unions and the principals associations that stepped in to lead in relation to the problems they faced. The closure problems, they lost their placements, they had to shut down college modules. They were pretty okay in relation to technology, and interestingly, this is one of the only institutions in Ireland that for the past number of years has already been involved in eTwinning and providing eTwinning programs for their courses. So the teachers on the MTP program were already exposed to working online through projects like eTwinning projects and so on. I think that was important. They built up their online experience, and they built up most of all confidence among the core group that were teaching into the program. So that was the impact, if you like, of that. They did it by transitioning with an emphasis on pedagogical use and focusing on what the students wanted. They were desperate to learn more about doing interviews for jobs in the Irish situation. That became the applied focus of so much of the work. Yes, there was focus on infrastructure, but it was very much infrastructure that was for the sake of the students. Laptops were provided to the students, technology access, broadband was paid for in home situations that courses like this would not normally do. And school support, however, was a bit mixed. Some schools were prepared to continue supporting their students, others were not. And the students had to kind of deal with that, and so did the institution. So the takeaways, very student-centered response. The interesting thing for me was the absolute focus that was put on well-being and social presence. So rather than just kind of consider them customers, they became part of the learning community, and a huge amount of attention was paid to keeping them safe and keeping them connected and in touch with each other. So that was important. Many of the school partners, both primary and secondary, stepped up and did their part, and the teacher unions and principals associations were also heavily involved in the collaboration that helped this very interesting teaching project, teaching program to continue to survive as it has done today. They've now recruited for the coming year. They have 75, where last year they had only 39. So if I were to step back and say, well, putting it all together, what would I say about, what we've learned from the COVID experience? I'd say that the parts of the network work and the parts of the program work that was most effective were the parts that dealt with immediate and applied value, where the emphasis was put on timely support, the type of support that the students needed, or the type of support that the teachers and instructors needed when they needed it. So that was the first element that strikes me in terms of lessons well learned from the whole pandemic thing. The second is that there was serious framing in on teacher educators. A huge challenge was posed to teacher educators. And that became a challenge that involved assembling our own expertise. We had to figure it out for ourselves by going to webinars, by connecting with each other, by working across institutions in ways that we'd never done previously, and by working across departments and schools in places like UCD. I met colleagues, I'm there for 20-something years, I met colleagues I never met before, because we were all struggling with the same problems about teaching and moving online. And the final two takeaways, capability focused work is what's really needed. It's not just about competence, it's about competence with confidence. And that's where it really made a difference for the student teachers, when that was mixed into what they did. And then finally, an ethic of concern and care. This idea of social presence, being there, emailing, quick SMS texting, little chats on chat, just to make sure they're okay. That is a profoundly important part of the learning experience in terms of getting through COVID. And I hope that stays. I think it will. It'll certainly stay on our program, and I hope it'll stay in many, many others. So the final kind of move then, if you like, in what I wanted to say today was, well, how does this all connect to eTwinning for teachers, for future teachers particularly? And how can we build on the COVID moment? Well, I'm looking at it as a kind of a bridge between what we did and what we can do and what we are doing in many ways. And I'd say these are, for me, the main learning points. That eTwinning for future teachers will help us collaborate in ways that we've not done previously. It will help us build teacher knowledge. It'll help us construct teacher knowledge in a way that many of us have not been involved in previously. It will help us to build pedagogical and technology competence. Now notice pedagogy first, technology second, but to build it in that sense of capability, not just being able to, but being able to do so confidently and being able to do so in a way that is meaningful for the students that we are working with and for the pupils they in turn will be working with. It allows us to bring in real world problem solving and innovation through projects in ways that we couldn't do previously in teacher education. And it allows us to build skills in relation to communication, collaboration, mutual support, and so on. In sense, it allows us to build mini learning communities within the larger learning community that is eTwinning. That's more or less what I wanted to say. I hope that's brought a few questions in at least, and I hope that it's been useful to colleagues in terms of sharing. It's not everything I've learned. I think I'll probably go on learning, but I've tried to pull out some of the things that I think are most important and some of the things that I think in so many ways can actually help in connection to eTwinning for future teachers as we move forward. Thanks, Ruth.
No, thank you, Conor. Thank you so much. There's so many nice insights that we can take from your speech. I actually wrote several things. And as you know, in eTwinning, you've been implementing, and I actually introduced this in the first day of this conference, implementing an initiative since 2012 to actually support and reinforce the initial teacher education with eTwinning. And I actually really liked your sentence when you said you only lead a community that wants to be led. And we more and more feel that this is a community within the community of eTwinning that also wants to be led and wants to be encouraged and supported, and more. I mean, nobody, of course, liked the year we had, but it actually opened our eyes for several areas and for several things that needed to be done. And I also enjoyed it very much when you said that it's about competence with confidence.
Yeah.
And we also heard in the beginning, in the first day, the best practices when the teacher educators were sharing, and also the student teacher was sharing, that eTwinning indeed gave this confidence, not only the competence, but the confidence that they needed. And they felt they were better prepared for the, well, whatever we had to face this year. They were better prepared because they were part of eTwinning. While we are already receiving some questions from participants, I encourage everyone to actually share, because we still have actually some time to go through some questions, some comments. So please, I encourage you to post that on the Q&A. But I would like to first ask Conor, what would you recommend for this specific audience, for teacher educators and the student teachers that are listening to us? We have 150 here with us today. What would be your main recommendations now that we are looking into the future? We are changing, actually, we are no longer calling this initiative an initiative, no longer Teacher Training Institute's initiative, but more eTwinning for Future Teachers. What would be your main recommendations for this new phase of initial teacher education in eTwinning?
Okay, well, the first thing, I think the change of name is not just symbolic. I think it's profoundly important. It changes it away from sort of, something that may have a future and may not have a future, the idea of an initiative, to something that definitely has a future. And that's the first point I make. I think eTwinning within initial teacher education has a very important future. So for student teachers, I would say find ways of becoming involved in eTwinning projects. There are very good platforms involved in partner sharing. Join the community, look at the projects that are already there, look at the kits particularly. They're a wonderful way of beginning to find your way into eTwinning. So make use of the resources that are already there in the teaching spaces of the eTwinning community, because you're a teacher. They're written for teachers by teachers. And I think that's an important point to make. Get in there, get involved, have a go. It won't always work, but it's important that you give it a try. For teacher educators, I would say one thing. Programs like eTwinning will work best when you incorporate them into your modules, when they are not just an extra or a bolt-on or something that you're doing as well as the work that you're doing in, let's say, in relation to technology and education. When they become a central part of that teaching block, that's when it'll start to really make the magic. So try to find ways of involving eTwinning activities and projects in a formal way, perhaps, certainly informally, but in a formal way within the modules that you actually teach. Don't bring them on as an extra something that your students might do. Put them at the heart of what you're doing, because they have all of the hallmarks that I've just kind of mentioned. They will increase the students' ability in terms of their technical understandings, but much more importantly, they will allow them to stretch themselves in terms of that space where technology meets pedagogy. And that's a profoundly important thing, I think, for student teachers these days. We've seen the opening out in the new digital plans that have just been announced of increased commission interest in this whole area. So I think any teacher educator who wants to find a way of involving themselves in eTwinning as a core activity will be much more easily able to do so in the future than perhaps in the past. In the past, you were a bit, I won't say maverick, but you're a bit sort of out on your own, unless you were lucky enough to know other teacher educators who are involved in eTwinning. So, for example, when we did the ITE Lab project a couple of years ago, a number of us were already involved in eTwinning. So some of the activities in that ITE Lab project centered around eTwinning type activities. But that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't already been introduced to the concepts of eTwinning. And I came across eTwinning, as I say, a long time ago, but I'm incredibly impressed by the work that's done by the national services in terms of supporting teachers. So here in Ireland, we're seeing a huge upsurge, and I'm delighted to see it. at the National Support Service level, which is Lérgos in this country. They're now actively reaching out to teacher educators and asking them to do what I've just described. Build eTwinning into the daily projects that they actually run, build it into the teaching modules and so on. And I think that's an important step in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Conor. I'm trying to look through the questions and the comments. And someone says that collaboration is the solution. And indeed, I think that the main change and the main mind shift that I've been seeing within the teacher educators that are involved in eTwinning and that are starting to be involved is indeed not exactly the project-based work or the usage of technology, is that the collaboration, the open-mindedness to actually collaborate with other colleagues, not only from other countries, but also from their own institution, to leave aside their own space, but actually to open to other spaces and to other colleagues and to other realities. And this is lovely to see. I'm not sure if you want to further comment on this aspect of the collaboration.
I would absolutely agree. I think everything that eTwinning makes possible is made possible through collaboration. And when I started my little talk at the very beginning, I said that one of the things that I suppose characterized my learning as a teacher educator down the years is what I learned through being involved in projects. Projects are all about collaboration. So there is huge benefit to be had from being involved in eTwinning projects in terms of the basic give and take that's involved in collaboration. Mm-hmm. We all like to be involved in collaborations, but no one really likes to be coordinated in terms of that involvement. You like to lead more often than to follow. In many ways, that's the kind of people we are as teacher educators, perhaps. So we have to kind of be a little bit more humble and set part of that aside and learn to be partners in projects as much as leaders in projects. And that's a different type of collaboration. That's what I mentioned, for example, about being, leadership and followership. The Dresden example is a wonderful example of people who were able to step away a little bit from their own precious expertise and become more open to conversations with colleagues across the institution than they had been previously. And it has made a huge difference to the quality of the support they've been able to offer to their student teachers in the program in these difficult times. Now, I think that will continue. And I think those sorts of learnings will actually continue way out beyond the COVID moment.
Yeah, I have here one comment. I will just read it to you. Hector, I don't know from where Hector is, but thank you, Hector, for your comment. I will read it. Paradoxically, this pandemic has encouraged sort of a walled-off feeling instead of promoting much more cooperation in between teachers and students all around Europe. But anyway, I strongly believe ICT skills to spot
support,
and find out new horizons in my profession, or better said, mission to be a committed teacher.
That's an interesting comment, and I think Hector, wherever Hector may actually be, is very much on the money with that observation. We have rediscovered what it is like, to feel and to think and to be teachers. It's less clinical, I think, now than it had been in recent times. We're less focused on learning outcomes and objectives and so on. We're much more focused on the people that we're actually working with on our programs and courses. That whole thing of social presence, that whole thing of looking out for each other, that whole thing of well-being, it's starting to come through in ways that I've never seen in 20, 25 years, 30 years as a teacher educator. And I think it makes us better teacher educators. So I would agree 100% with that observation. So it's unfortunate that it's taken a pandemic to do it, but it has certainly helped us to rediscover, if you like, the inner, more human nature of the beast when it comes to being a teacher educator. We're a little bit more aware of the fact that we're dealing with real people rather than just, students. So at least that's my reading of it.
Yeah. Here in Portugal, we have a saying that the need makes the engine. I don't know if it's that the right translation, but when you have the need, well, you make the tool for that need. And basically, I think that's what we had this year. I mean, everyone had a need, and immediately they tried to find the tools. They were already there, but in any case, it was more visible. Actually, staying in Portugal, which is a nice country to stay, I have a comment from Portugal. So Luis Gonçalves from Portugal says, I don't know about the rest of Europe, but in Portugal, we have a huge number of teachers close to retirement age. In the following years, we will need new blood at school. eTwinning for future teachers is crucial to take the sharing spirit to the schools.
That's again an interesting one. eTwinning as part of the solution to what are seen as increasing problems in relation to teacher shortages and teacher retirements, and I would agree. But I think it's important that it's not just Portugal. I think, you know, eTwinning takes you beyond the boundaries of any individual region or state or country, and I think when it's used in that regard, it opens up possibilities. So, for example, the migrant teacher project that I mentioned there. They were involved in eTwinning type projects with their sending countries, their home countries originally, and that made it made a huge impression on the young people in the schools where they were placed. So to have a teacher from Brazil who can't qualify in Ireland until they actually do this particular program, and then to have them connecting you in a classroom in, you know, somewhere deep in County Leitrim, you know, right out in the rural part of the country, to have you connected to a vibrant community in a small town in Brazil through an eTwinning type project. It's extraordinary stuff. And it has to be good for us culturally. It has to open up possibilities and discussions. And I do think it makes a difference to what we can do in terms of teachers, and how we can help younger teachers and mid-age teachers and even older teachers. Because some of the best, you know this, Ruth, as well as I do, some of the very, very best eTwinning projects are done by well-established teachers who are comfortable in their career, some of them right up close to retirement. They do the most wonderful projects. I think that's an untapped resource in teacher education as well. We have a number of colleagues who have now just discovered technology almost for the first time. And to actually bring those into the conversations about what we can do next, I think will make a difference as we push down the road ahead.
Indeed, and that's also why I've tried to focus the relationships in the first day, relationships that need to be nurtured with the colleagues from the same institution, with other teachers, experienced teachers that are on the field and already well established, like you were rightly pointing out, and with the national support organizations for eTwinning as well. Well, just a piece of information. Hector is from Italy. Thank you, Hector, for your comment. And actually, Antonia Calo, she says that during the lockdown, eTwinning was the solution for many Italian schools. And not only for Italian schools, we actually opened a group called eTwinning at Home, and we tried to support as much as we could everyone that was on the field. I don't know if there's any other comments. I kindly ask all participants to share your comments on the Q&A. If not, if there are no further comments, I would like to ask Conor, would you like to make any final remarks, any final comments for our audience before we break?
Oh, well, just you know, if you are already involved in eTwinning as a teacher educator, that's fantastic. If you're just thinking about finding your way into it, and if you have some hesitation and reservations, just do it anyway, because it will change the experience for your student teachers. And that is to my mind, that's the one big selling point. It will make them better teachers. It will help them to become more confident. It will help them to become more engaged. And here's the important part, to have a much better and stronger sense of themselves as professionals. Those are the byproducts, if you like, of eTwinning and eTwinning projects. And I think it's time that we brought a lot of that into the mainstream of teacher education.
Well, thank you so much, Conor, once more. I really appreciate. We have several comments, but it's really thanking you for your speech and for your comments. So thank you for joining us today. And well, now we will have a short break, and then we will come back to hear about some results of a research that was done in Italy, and I'll give you more details later on when we restart. So I kindly ask you to stay with us. We resume at 11:15. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much indeed, Ruth. Thank you, Jessica, for being the silent presence in the background there. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back. I see that the rest of the participants are joining us from the other plenary sessions, which is great. Welcome back to the ones that I didn't say hello in the beginning of this morning. Great to see you here. And we are ready to start our last but not least session of our conference. Now we will have a moment to actually know a little bit more about research done in Italy. To do this, we have Maria Chiara Pettenati, Research Director of Indire, National Institute for Innovation and Educational Research in Italy, and Maria Ranieri, PhD, and she's an Associate Professor of Education, Media and Technology at the University of Florence, specializing in the theory and methodology of media and technology in education, of course. And with Maria, Chiara, and Maria Ranieri, we have Francesco Fabbro, also a research fellow at the University of Florence. And his main research interests are media literacy, education, and qualitative research methods in education. Well, today they will share the floor, introducing us preliminary results from a research study in the Italian context, on eTwinners innovative professional development. The presentation will introduce the theoretical framing and also the methodological approach adopted to investigate eTwinners professional development in the Italian context, while providing also an overview of the preliminary research results from an empirical study carried out throughout the current year. And to start with, I would like to give now the floor to Maria Chiara. Maria Chiara, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with you today. As Ruth said, the subject of our talk today is a research study conducted in Italy, in our country, by the eTwinning Italian unit in Indire, together with Indire Research, to whom I belong, and the University of Florence. Francesco, please, can you show the agenda slide? Thank you. As you see from this agenda, we organized our talk in three parts. In the first short introduction, I will state the rationale and the aim of our study. Then my friend and colleague, Professor Maria Ranieri of the University of Florence, will enter into the core of the research discussion, discussing the competence framework we developed to sustain the research. And last but not least, Francesco Fabbro will provide some preliminary results of our research, which is still ongoing. And next slide, please. Thanks. So to set the scene, as we understood from the comments in the previous keynote session, it's important to remind that in Italy we have really a wide participation to the eTwinning community. We have one teacher out of 10 of the total teachers population in Italy who is involved in eTwinning. We have one school out of 4 which is involved in eTwinning projects. And we have an equal participation of schools, equal distribution among different school levels. So it's really an important presence of this initiative in our country. Next, please. Well, in this context, the motivation of our study is rooted in the need to support, to let emerge the importance of the professional development value of the eTwinning experience. As you perfectly know, it's really difficult to measure and to formalize the activity of an active eTwinner with respect to the metrics we are used to traditional teacher trainings, since the value of this experience is rooted in a number of non-formal, informal, formal activities which can be very varied and are carried within the project. So we make an hypothesis that the teacher who endorses in one or more eTwinning experience benefits from a positive impact on his teaching, his professionalism, his professional identity. And this cannot be but the result of a combination of activities, as Conor Galvin explained detailedly in his previous keynote. We have activities allowing to reflect on one's own teaching practice, activities to learn to collaborate remotely, to strengthen digital and linguistic skill, to get involved in innovation experiences. And this thanks to the community, the network engaging and triggering more formal, informal activities sustained and generated by the community itself. Next, thank you. We are sustained in our research hypothesis by the results of OECD TALIS research that tells us that the characteristics of effective teachers training have a lot in common with those characterizing the eTwinning experiences. First of all, TALIS tells us that effective teacher trainings need to be content focused. It needs to be built on teachers' previous knowledge. It needs to be focused on the content that the teacher needs to teach in his classroom. It needs to be to provide opportunity for active learning, for collaboration, opportunity to apply and practice in the classroom, opportunity to collaborate with peers, to experiment innovation. We also know from TALIS that effective teachers training is of sustained length. It's extended over a period of time. It allows reflection and feedback on the activity it carries out. And eventually it is school embedded. It's developed in teachers' school. It's involving colleagues and peers. And these are primary characteristics that you certainly well recognize as being typical of your eTwinning experience, of the experience sustained by the community. Thank you. Before leaving the floor to my colleague, Professor Maria Ranieri, let me restate the research aim. First, we want to investigate the teacher's perception about their eTwinning experience in relation to their own professionalism. And second, we aim at exploring this relationship between the perception and the level of involvement of the teachers in the eTwinning projects. So our hypothesis is that prolonged and intense participation in eTwinning activities is associated with a better perception of the impact of eTwinning on one's teaching, on one's professional development, of one's professional identity, and in the participation in the school community. So Maria, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Maria Chiara. Well, to continue the presentation of our research, let me introduce the framework which inspired the building up of our research tools. Indeed, to answer the questions that Maria Chiara just highlighted, we needed some tools that of course had to refer to some main dimensions we can help framing the digital professionalism of teachers. And as you know, the literature on teacher professional development, as well as the literature on pedagogic innovation, is huge. So the effort here was to narrow the focus in order to identify significant dimension which could fit with the needs of the eTwinning communities. And for this purpose, we considered, first of all, the competence balance sheet for eTwinning teachers, which has been developed by Cinganotto and other colleagues from the Indire Institute, and also European Framework for Digital Competence of Educators, the well-known DigCompedu, and lastly, the European Framework for Digitally Competent Educational Organization. Let's have a look at these three frameworks, please. Francesco, the next slide. Well, the first document that I've mentioned is the competence balance sheet for eTwinning teachers. What is interesting from this framework is that it has been developed starting with, on one side, some theoretical assumption. In particular, the idea at the center of this theoretical reflection is that the teacher is a reflective practitioner, so the idea of Sean, and somehow this relates with what Maria Chiara said before, that is that working on teacher professional development means bridging theory and practices, means put theory into practices and take inspiration from practices to reshape the thinking and theoretical reflection. So on one side, such kind of theoretical assumption. On the other side, several focus groups and workshops were carried out to confront with teachers and take from them comments, suggestions to reflect on this idea of reflective practitioners. And three main areas of competence have been identified. The first one relating to the teaching dimension, the second one relating to the organizational aspects, and the last one to professionalism. Some keywords as far as the teaching area is concerned. The attention was paid on the organization and management of learning situation, with a particular focus on the cross-disciplinary, multicultural and technological aspects, the formative evaluation, the engagement of students within the process with positive impacts on self-esteem and motivation. As far as the organization is concerned, of course, we are dealing with the organization of the school, so the school as organization and the role of the teacher in the school, and therefore her capacities to cooperate with colleagues to co-design learning paths, to participate in the management of the school and in the management of the relationship with the family. And lastly, as far as the professionalism is concerned of the teacher, the framework highlights the importance of the lifelong learning, the continuous professional development, their capacity to adopt new technologies for designing, management and training. Coming to the European Framework for Digital Competence of Educators, as likely you know, this framework emphasizes in particular the pedagogical and teaching aspects rather than the mere technical dimensions. And this is really important because very often, I mean, there's a risk, no, in innovation, in pedagogic innovation. The risk is that technologies absorb completely our attention, and we risk to under-evaluate the role of the methodological aspects. Even in this pandemic period, we experienced how the attention towards the platforms, the technological tools, and so on absorbed almost completely our attention. And now we say that teaching online is not successful. I'm wondering whether we were teaching or testing platforms. So I'm a bit provocative somehow, but I think that teachers involved in the eTwinning community can understand the point I'm raising. Testing platforms is totally different from designing online teaching. So the main dimensions which are included in the CompEdu framework relates to professional engagement, which is similar to the last dimension I just mentioned, presenting the work made by Indire on the eTwinner teacher profile. And another important dimension has to do with the capacity of teachers to create digital resources. And also in this pandemic era, we experience the relevance, the importance of being able to create digital resources for our students. This ability may allow teachers to individualize learning, to personalize learning. So it's crucial for teachers to be able to adapt learning content to the needs of the students, and the digital format is particularly suitable for individualization and personalization. The third area has to do with teaching and learning, and of course we are thinking of being able to design digital technology, digital learning, and then assessment. And the area of assessment maybe it's really the most critical one. I've carried out some research in the last month, and it clearly emerged how teachers are unprepared to assess learning outcomes to technologies in remote teaching. So I think this is an area relevant, at the same time needing more attention in terms of training. Another area has to do with empowering learners, so making learners able to self-manage their study, and finally facilitating learners' digital competence, which means promoting students' digital competencies, because, well, we are used to define students digital natives, but actually we discovered even during the pandemic how low their digital competencies are when coming to the use of technologies for studying and learning, not just for fun or wasting time. Let me use this expression. The last framework we considered to elaborate our framework is the European Framework for Digitally Competent Education Organizations. And here it's worth mentioning that this framework has been developed to support the innovation of our educational institution, while promoting processes of self-reflection on the state of advancement of the organization in terms of digital technologies. Today, the organizations have to be able to self-evaluate their knowledge, their capacity, because the innovation processes go so quickly that if the organization do not have this capacity, they really risk to miss the appointment with innovation. And the main dimensions that are included in this framework refers to leadership and practices of governance, of course. Without leadership, it's not possible to innovate anything. And even in this pandemic, we have realized how important is leadership in managing the digital transformation. Of course, the teaching and learning practices, the professional dimension, development, evaluation, the reshaping of the contents and the curriculum, the support to networking at school level, but not only at school level, but also across schools. And again, the pandemic taught us how important is activating, promoting peer-to-peer evaluation, peer-to-peer innovation processes, which means contaminate. Please let me use this verb, to contaminate other schools with good ideas. It's Hergraves talked about, used this method, this analogy, this metaphor to explain how innovation can spread out. And then, of course, an attention to the infrastructural dimension. So by combining and merging these different frameworks, we developed our framework, and Francesco, maybe you will focus on it. So I give you the floor to explain how we combined and finally got the result of shaping our research tools. Please, Francesco. Francesco.
No,
I cannot hear.
Okay, now you should be able to hear me. So as you can see, we identified the three areas of competence. The first one deals with didactics, teaching, but it's not just the practical action of teaching, but it's also the reflection of teaching. So it's more related to extended to a conception of pedagogy, and this entails four sub-areas of competence. The first deals with the ability to design educational interventions. Secondly, didactics refers to, of course, teaching itself, the way we understand teaching, and here I want to recall as Maria was explaining before, the reflexive approach to teaching, the reflexive practitioners. And didactics deals also with learning, how our teaching affects students' learning, and of course also how we evaluate students' learning. A second area of competence corresponds to professional attitude, and by professionalism here we mean professional ethics, digital professional ethics, which basically means how teachers find their way around the broader concepts of digital citizenship, which of course is a call for students, but is also an important aspect of professional development. And in this respect, actually, professionalism, professional attitude means also how teachers learn to use technology for teaching and how they train themselves, how they cooperate within the community. And this brings us to the third area of competence, which is school participation. School participation entails collaboration, of course, and collaboration among different actors in the school community, not only teachers, but also third parties, and how teaching is managed, how educational interventions are managed to fit in their school community and in the life of the school community. So let's see how this framework help us to define our research questions. And the first is about quantities, about it's a quantitative questions. To what extent teachers understand eTwinning as a boost to their didactics, professional attitude, and school participation. And then we look at eTwinning experience. When we talk about eTwinning here, of course, we are not talking merely about an online platform. We are talking about a wider experience, a set of practices, a set of relations, a network of relationships. So we are interested in this case on how teachers make sense of this complex experience in relations, of course, to our research focuses that are didactics, professional attitude, and again, school participation. So we devised two main data collection tools. The first is an online survey. We administered this survey to 1,034 in-service teachers based all over Italy from different schools, primary schools and secondary schools mainly. And we also explore the meanings teachers gave to their eTwinning experiences through 9 in-depth interviews with practicing teachers. And as far as the data analysis is concerned, we adopted a statistical description and analysis of correlations between variables. I will say something about it in the next slide, and the thematic analysis for the interviews. Let's look at some numbers now. On average, the participants felt that their eTwinning experience greatly improved their competencies in the area of didactics and professional attitudes. If you look at this table, you can see how the mean of didactics is very close to the maximum score in the last column on the right. And similarly, professional attitude, also the score, the mean of professional attitude is very close to the maximum score, which is 55 here. differently, school participation, on the one hand, is still a trend of improvement of competencies, so that there's a positive perception of the impact of eTwinning experience on school participation, but is less marked than in the two previous areas. Let's look at some correlations here. We found very positive and significant relationships between the registration time of the platform and the scores in all areas of competence. This means that basically the more you are in eTwinning, the more you feel competent in all the three areas of our framework. A second correlation is we found very positive correspond to the relationships between the number of projects carried out by practicing teachers in their career and the score in all areas of competence. This is helpful to provide you with a big picture, but of course, in order to explore a little bit more the meanings of these correlations, it's helpful to look at some emerging themes from the thematic analysis. For the didactics area, I will present separately the three areas, but I will observe also some connections and how some themes cuts across the three areas of competences. So firstly, eTwinning is seen as a flexible template to co-design educational interventions fitting the school curriculum. This means that teachers find helpful the design mindset embedded in the eTwinning as far as is flexible, as far as fits in the school curriculum. And this recalls very well, I think, what Professor Conor Galvin said before in relation to the importance of building the eTwinning projects into the teaching model, the school curriculum. Secondly, eTwinning is seen as an actual concretization of active citizenship, active teaching methods. I mean, we all know the benefits of active teaching methods, but the actual opportunity to implement active teaching, especially in virtual and multicultural environment, cannot be taken for granted. And I think during the pandemic, we are experiencing this challenge of implementing active teaching methods in such a virtual online spaces. Thirdly, eTwinning is understood as a means of socially situated learning, which means basically how the project-based learning is actually working in relation especially to language education, which is quite predictable. I mean, how the learning of English language is widely facilitated by the eTwinning experience. But most interestingly is this situated learning relates also to the ability to communicate and in a multicultural setting, and I think it is important, given the emphasis of contemporary policies on civic competencies and in multicultural environment, in multicultural schools. Fourthly, eTwinning is seen as a challenge to subject-oriented and individual evaluation of students' learning. This is interesting because eTwinning experience pushes the boundaries of what we understand by evaluation, and how in school we are used to evaluate the individual rather than the cooperation and the groups, and how the evaluation is really linked to the subject, the school subjects. eTwinning in this respect is interesting because it's helpful to rethink how we are evaluating students' learning, and even though it's still an open issue, the one of evaluation, I think this is a benefit. We think rethinking our evaluation in a more culturally sensitive and inclusive way is an important challenge. As for the area of professional attitude, eTwinning is seen as a safe online environment for the cultivation of digital ethics. eTwinning is let's say, to use a metaphor, a calling card, a good calling card, as some interviews say, for parents who are concerned about the threats of online environment, and it's helpful also to get your way around privacy issues, use of images of children, and very practical and concrete knowledge about digital ethics, which cannot be taken for granted. And eTwinning is also a tool in teachers' perspective of self-directed and mutual peer training about how we can teach effectively through technology, with the help of technology. And this comes in an international community of practices where eTwinners learn from each other. Finally, very briefly, eTwinning is seen as a site of collaboration among teachers at the international level rather than at school level. Often teachers indicated the difficulties to involve colleagues, but also the benefit of working with other teachers and collaborate with other teachers, most of the time from other schools, from other countries. eTwinning again is as an integral component of school curriculum. This vision, this understanding of the relationship between the school curriculum and eTwinning is crucial for a sustainable management of the project in the school community. Finally, eTwinning can be seen, it has been described by some interviewees also as a potential strategy to boost the whole school approach, relying on the involvement of external parties, city councils, NGOs, parents. I would leave the floor to the questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Francesco, for the interesting outline and sharing with us already some preliminary results. I actually have one question for you while we wait for the other attendees to actually share their questions. I don't know who can answer this question, but when are you planning to publish the results, and more or less when are you foreseeing that? It would be lovely to understand more or less how you're planning to do that. I don't know if it's Maria Chiara.
It's Maria, she goes away. Please, Maria.
Maria Ranieri. Yeah, okay. You are muted, Maria. Sorry. Maria, you are muted. Could you please turn on your mic, please?
Sorry.
Thank you. No problem.
We are managing many things at the same time. Well, if I understood, the question is whether we are going to publish the results, right? Yes. Of course, we are going to do it, and the idea is publishing the results. Okay, Francesco has talking about the quantitative study we are doing, but we will integrate the quantitative results with a series of interviews that we are analyzing these weeks. So the intention is to publish a summary of the research results, combining both data. So Francesco, maybe in 6 months at most, we will be able to publish the final version of the results of the study. Yes, sure. Wonderful. Then there's also, okay, fine.
Wonderful. I don't know if
Francesco wants to add anything, please.
Sure. Go ahead, Francesco. Would you like to add something?
So yeah, I confirm we will be able to present the report in 6 months, the final version.
Okay. It would be very interesting to share with the eTwinning community. I actually have here a comment. I don't know who's actually asking, but they're asking if if you have any notion if this is the perception in the other countries. So if this perception that you just presented is the same in other countries. You have any idea who could answer this question also? Sorry. Maria?
Francesco?
Okay.
Okay, I can answer. Okay, well, of course, we can see some relationships with the previous researchers in other countries. For example, in the presentation, I emphasize the similarity between the professor by Conor Galvin, who were talking about Ireland, about the importance of building the eTwinning educational interventions into the existing teaching model, into the school curriculum. That's key, I think, is very common across a lot of countries. This kind of flexible and purposeful management of the design of eTwinning interventions and projects.
Okay, wonderful. There's a question more onto the, I guess, the model of research. So they are thinking for the big picture. Is this model, can this model be used in other countries? So I guess if they're asking if they can use the same model. So Maria, yes, please.
I take the floor, yes, because I've introduced the background of the model. Yeah. Absolutely, yes, because two of the frameworks which provided the ground from our framework are from the European Community Union. So, of course, it's a transnational approach to deal teacher and school innovation issues. So absolutely, the answer is absolutely positive, and the eTwinner profile reflect, I mean, the organization that eTwinning has at European level. So the framework is based on a combination of European frameworks and approaches, basically, and also on a tradition of study on teacher professional development, which has an international flavor. So I absolutely think that it can be adopted and contextualized to other contexts too. I would say that I hope that other countries will adopt the framework, because this will allow us to compare the results. So, I mean, if we adopt similar frameworks, we can make comparisons. Otherwise, the comparisons is really hard. So I hope.
Okay, actually, I have one question then for you following that, and it can maybe still Maria answering this question, is if other teacher educators interested in this research and interested in implementing the same model, can they contact you? How can they contact you? Are you available for that? So more in that direction.
Okay. I think so, because research is networking. So we cannot but say yes, please. If you wanna adapt the survey to your country, contact us. There's a wide infrastructure, which includes not only the University of Florence, but also the National Agency of eTwinning in Italy, Indire. So we can afford managing teachers reacting to our presentation. And Maria Chiara maybe can add something about this.
Yeah. Yes, of course, we are more than willing to share and to collaborate with other units. And I wanted to say that recognizing and valuing the eTwinning experience as a truly meaningful experience of professional development, I think it's a concern not only for our country, but of all the eTwinning community at an international level. And I think that it's also a need, a always more urgent need, because the community has grown in the last years, and it has increased its potential in becoming something truly meaningful in professional developments. And our countries, our policies, national country policies in teacher education are introducing the characteristics of which are typical of the eTwinning community, and demand that our teachers follow meaningful experiences in their school, rooted in their classroom. And this is certainly a need, and we share it internationally. So we are more than happy to discuss with the Italian eTwinning unit, and we are with our colleagues of the University of Florence, collaborate internationally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We still have 3 more questions to go. I'm trying to see which one I can ask first. So maybe I'll leave the more political question for the end. And the first one I would ask is, was the research carried out before the pandemic? Would you say the pandemic changes the result? Francesco, thank you. You're muted, Francesco. Please open your microphone. Thank you.
The research was carried out during the pandemic, and we also made some specific questions related to their teaching experience with the eTwinning during the pandemic. We didn't have the time to explore that aspect in our presentation, but in depth. But we consider also this relationship between the pandemic and the teaching in eTwinning, and so yeah, probably the pandemic affected somehow the results, but not in to a great extent, because actually when we asked to teachers about the number, for example, of projects, we consider one specific school year, the one before the pandemic, that is 2018 and 2019. So we try to, we consider the situation, but we also try to focus on more ordinary school years in our investigation in order to give a balance to these two aspects.
Okay, I think this next question is still for you, Francesco. And nonetheless, I will just ask first, why do you think the weaker point is school participation? How could we help here?
So, sorry, how you could help?
Yes, somebody's asking if they can help, because you mentioned that the weaker point is the school participation. So how can they help?
Well, school participation is a big issue. It cannot be also merely an eTwinning issue. It's a matter of school culture. It's a matter of culture of education that, as we try to explain, eTwinning is somehow contributing to change in terms of innovation, and definitely according to some teachers we interview, more support can be helpful in relation to evaluation methods, how for example ambassadors can guide teachers in get their new ways of evaluation and knowledge also at school level. So it's a matter of culture of education, and it's a long process probably, but this is maybe the paths we can follow.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. And one last question. I'll just read it. Research more or less confirms our perception, but how important is to have these perceptions backed by research? How can these influence policy? So maybe, who wants to answer? Maria Chiara? No?
It's a tough question.
The last one.
It's a tough question. I think that research should always inform policy. So it's up to the policymakers to be informed by research results, and of course the role, for instance, as of our National Research Institute, working closely to the Ministry of Education, is to inform, provide research results to inform the policies. So I think it's a matter of social dialogue, and it's a big issue. OECD launched a research from now on to understand the channels and the ways of the social dialogues and how they inform the policy adoption during the pandemic and after the pandemic. So I think it's an ongoing activity. We will make our best to provide the clear and understandable readability of our research results so as it can be used by policymakers.
Actually, following this question, another one came just in, and maybe Maria Chiara, you can still answer this one. It's from Una. How important is that eTwinning is explicitly referred to in teacher education policy, in your opinion, and in Italy?
Very important. everywhere, not only in Italy. Definitely, yes. It should be. It comes to the important point that Francesco highlighted before, a matter of growing a culture. And once the eTwinning is explicitly introduced in policy document, in school documents, in improvement plans, in the self-evaluation report of schools, I think that there is the beginning of a growing movement that allows a culture to grow and to go on. So it's definitely very important.
Thank you so much to the three of you for sharing with us the results. We look forward for the summary of the results. And actually, we now move towards the end of our conference. And before I give the floor to our closing speech to Wilhelm Vukovich from the European Commission, I would like to just say a few words. First, about the certification. A lot of you have been asking if you are a registered participant in the conference, you will receive the certificates next week. You don't need to worry about that. We are always available for your questions. So if you have any further question on that, you can always email us. Then another point that I would like to make is that actually it's a thank you note. Thank you so much for joining us for the networking activities. Also, this is also for the registered participants. Thank you. I heard that was a lot of fun, a lot of interaction, a lot of networking moments, crucial for the building of this community. And the results, maybe you are curious to see the results. The results will be shared in the next days on the website of the event, okay, in the restricted area for the registered participants. So thank you so much to all the moderators of the groups. Thank you to everyone that participated for your engagement and your contribution to this networking activity. Well, we had 3 intense days full of activities. There's a lot. I've been receiving a lot of messages saying that there's a lot to take in, and that they gained a lot of knowledge. You gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of new tools, which is great. And we look forward for this new phase of eTwinning for future teachers. And on that note, I would like to give now the floor to Wilhelm Vukovich from the European Commission, who will give us our final words. And thank you so much again for your engagement. And Wilhelm, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello, good afternoon to everyone, and I'm happy to be with you today, and I'm also honored to say some closing words, yeah, because and thanks for everyone who is still online and listening to this end. I'm very happy that in fact this conference went well, that in fact it was a success, and for me it shows that the eTwinning has increased its potential to effectively address the teacher educators and student teachers even more in this I would say dramatic year, which will be remembered very well, the year 2020. What we know already now, in fact, on the stats, that we were able to reach out to more persons of our target audience, in particular for the plenary session, and in fact, it is. I must say I enjoyed very much, in particular the plenaries, yeah, because. I think they gave a very broad overview and a very broad picture. In fact, looking in eTwinning for future teachers from various angles, from the angle of the student teacher, from the angle of the teacher educator, and of course we have seen a couple of research results which are worthwhile to disseminate and to spread in the eTwinning community. I would like, in fact, close to to share a little bit my thoughts. Yeah, originally I was thinking of to say something about takeaways, but I think I found it better my personal thoughts. And first of all, there were wonderful presentations, and I must say I found the one from the student teacher Chiara of the first day very interesting. Yeah, because she said of a couple of things which are indeed very worthwhile. In fact, in particular that she sees or eTwinning as some sort of a window for going beyond the teacher education institution, and it is to a window to the outside world. And in this respect, I was also a little bit, in fact, recalling what was formerly for the former Erasmus program. In fact, the old Erasmus program, which is only for which was only for students. Yes, because this began, in fact, at the end of the 80s, and there is, of course, one issue which I would say many people don't know. Yeah, but the Italian colleague was referring yesterday on the European higher education area, and in fact, I must say that the Erasmus, the student mobility of Erasmus, paved the way for it. Yeah, because nowadays everybody knows the ECTS system, which is applied in universities. Yeah, but the origins of it are in the student mobility of Erasmus. Because when students were abroad for a time, then and came back, they wanted in fact that it is somehow recognized, and this was in fact the impetus to creating this ECTS system. Coming back now to the issues of student teachers and to make some sort of comparison, I give much hope in the enthusiasm of the student teachers. Yeah, because I think initial teacher education institutions, they are in fact not changing course quickly. In fact, it needs time that they adapt. Yeah, but I very much hope that the student teachers will push in fact the institutions and also their educators to give eTwinning a boost, and to what Conor Galvin was indicating, that it should be integrated in the curricula of their education, and this is, of course, we are very much aiming for. I'm also happy to say that that the number of student teachers is boosting, so it is in fact growing exponentially, and you know, or everybody knows nowadays, if somebody speaks about exponential growth, yeah, people get very nervous. Yeah, but I see in this respect as a very positive sign, and I very much hope that many student teachers will be infected by the eTwinning virus. Going now a little bit further, another thought it is about the teacher educators. Yeah, because we have seen in the research how important it is also to take them on board. And there was during I would say the first and the day and today, there was one red thread in the presentation, and this is what was and this is collaboration and exchange, and this respect, in fact, it is this is very well known in the research. Yeah, but I think we shouldn't hide it. We should promote it, and that it is very well anchored in our communities. And lastly, I would would like to close the cycle, in fact, to this to that what the Commission is doing here, because our vision of the education profession within the European education area is one of a highly competent and motivated educator who can benefit from a range of support and professional development opportunities throughout their career. And because as a matter of fact, and it is well known, we have to overcome the teacher shortage. We have to revalorize the teaching profession in social and sometimes also in financial terms, offer continuous opportunities for professional development and foster the international mobility of students, teachers, and teacher educators. And of course, I would like to highlight that we have to think even further how to integrate eTwinning, and in particular eTwinning for future teachers to achieve these goals. This is all in fact, with regard to my thoughts, and of course I'm also looking forward to see the report of this conference, which and the outcome, the summary of the outcomes, which we of course we will share with everyone. Last but not least, I would like to thank wholeheartedly the Italian eTwinning team, Donatella and her colleagues, all the other national support services which were involved, and of course also Rute from the Central Support Service for organizing this event. I think it was a wonderful conference. And finally, a big thank you to our presenters, in particular the teacher educators, researchers, and student teachers who were sharing their experiences. So, to conclude, under the current circumstances, I close this meeting by wishing you to stay safe and healthy. Thank you, and hopefully we will see us again at another opportunity. Goodbye. Thank you.